Without consulting me, 1.5 years ago, the extended family apparently made the decision sister-in-law would leave her kid's dad and move in with me, my husband, and our 2 kids to help as I recovered from major surgery. Backstory: I was fired from my then job because of needing the surgery, which made a lot of the family furious with me. Many are in the medical field and didn't feel my surgery was necessary, while 3 specialists strongly encouraged it. They seemed to believe I refused to work or have Munchausen's. My kids love their little cousins, but sister-in-law acted like my kids were taking resources from her children. She'd just shrug when they'd call my husband, her brother, Daddy. She taunted me on the regular for being fired and mentioned she feels I don't contribute enough financially. She'd piss and moan whenever my kids got anything. Let's also note, the first couple years out of college, we both worked at different lucrative entry-level jobs. Neither loved what we did. I stuck with mine, while she chooses part-time, lower-paying roles. She moved out after a nasty argument about a year ago and got pregnant and her own apartment shortly after. Because she was so self-righteously angry that I expressed resentment for her then 2 kids, moving in. I'm not allowed to meet the baby or even know its name, gender. In fairness, I was wrong to resent the kids living there, but they were unsupervised and destructive, little kids, and that was 100% on her. I'm physically limited, work 45 hours a week, and generally bust my butt at home, kids' school, and at the office, while my husband is at her beck and call whenever she needs XYZ done around her house. There are a million cousins, plus her dad and stepbrothers all live close by who don't do crap. She may like her family better without the kids' fathers, and I do feel for the kids that growing up low income with a single mom isn't a great start. But this is the result of her choices. If she needs help around the house, she needs to be getting that from people whose wives she can be civil around. Also, I feel my husband is far too focused on her and her kids, and it enables her apparent delusion that my kids and I are in the way and taking something from her and her kids. It also makes him a much worse husband and father, and much less present. His half-presence with us is worse than no presence at all. She's still in her 30s and could well have several more kids. He's constantly comparing the 2 sets of kids and acting like mine are getting unfair privileges. Totally comes from her. He's now apparently not willing to have a 3rd child, which was the plan. Why the hell should he have 5 kids calling him daddy? And someone else, IRL, has asked, I don't think he's actually their dad. I need some serious help ASAP. My husband either needs to stop enabling her and cut her loose, or just sign 100% custody of the kids over to me and cut all ties with us. He sucks at being a dad in 2 homes, and it's unattainable. You need to sit him down and ask him who is his spouse, you, his wife, or his sister, because one of you needs to go, and it should not be you. She should be embarrassed of her kids calling their uncle daddy. That kind of thing can ruin a family's reputation. And I'm sorry, but if my nephews or niece called dear husband daddy, I'd be quick to correct them that he is their uncle. I can't believe everybody is even allowed. My challenges with H mother-in-law started as soon as we got engaged, about 17 years ago. H mother-in-law insisted on taking me dress shopping for the engagement party. I didn't want the party or the dress, but that was all insisted upon too. And we went to a couple of different shops. She ended up pulling out a dress not at all my style, and in fact, kind of trashy. I'm very modest, and so is she. It wasn't the kind of thing she, her daughter, or anyone in the family would have worn, ever. I tried it on, wanting to please her of course, and came out of the dressing room saying, I don't think so. But she physically grabbed my arm and dragged me to the clerk, and had the clerk scan the dress and paid for it on the spot and left immediately. I stood there with the dress still on, thinking, what on earth just happened? Later, she asked my dear husband, then my fiancé, if he liked the dress, and he told her honestly that it wasn't my style, but I enjoyed our evening together, and she lost her mind and had a huge tantrum and said she would never do anything nice for me again. Dear husband, then fiance, was living with her at the time, getting volunteer hours to apply for a post-grad degree. She controlled his time every single day. Some days, I wouldn't hear from him at all. Some days, I would go to her home to try to do wedding planning, and she would call his name and act like she was sick or whatever, every few minutes, until I finally left. Often, we had to go out to get away from her. One night, we were having dinner, and she called him to come home right now because her garbage had to go out before the morning, and apparently, last time he forgot. He legit stopped our dinner halfway through to go home for her. The thing is, I disagreed with his lack of spine, but she would make his life and mine hell if we didn't give her what she wanted immediately. One night, dear husband, fiance, and I had an argument about the wedding. By the way, I'm a quiet person, and there was no swearing, name-calling, door-slamming, etc. It was the two of us in a room having a heated but respectful discussion. And as soon as I left, she bombarded him demanding to know how and why I hurt his feelings. He gave her a summary, because again, with her, if you try to say no ever, or set any boundary ever, she loses her mind and would have even kicked him out for saying back off to her. It would never have occurred to him back then to say that to her. The next day we were helping friends move, and she showed up for like 5 minutes, and in front of a bunch of mutual friends, she grabbed my arm, spanked me hard on the bottom, and said, "You hurt my baby." I was so shocked I just walked away. She ended up going home, I guess because she was so upset she needed to rest or some nonsense like that. About a month before the wedding, my dear husband, fiance, had it out with her. She was blasting him about breaking up with me and calling off the wedding. She was threatening S if he didn't call it off. By the way, she does this when she doesn't get her way. As far as we know, she has never actually been S. She told him, "Your wedding will be a funeral," and he packed a bag and moved out. Of course, she immediately called everyone she knew, most of them invited to the wedding, and cried to them about how horrible and mean he was to her, and how we were out of God's will. This came after months of her and my sister-in-law fasting and praying that we would break up. My sister-in-law's hubby told us they never fasted, excluding us from events such as a family photo and family B-day parties, and trying to damage our reputation with most of dear husband's circle. Dear husband is kind and gentle, not perfect, but never truly raised his voice to her or did anything mean. She just demands 100% of what she wants all the time. The night before the wedding, she called dear husband multiple times, crying, yelling, using multiple strategies to get her way. She said she was going to K herself. She said she heard from God that we were wrong. She said she thought she was having a heart attack and should go to the hospital. Dear husband kept a calm line of, "I love you, Mom, and I'll see you tomorrow." But she kept at it. She told him she might not even come to the wedding. And of course, he started begging her to come, because he struggles with boundaries. She did come, of course. She knows how to make an appearance. And she wore white. A month later, when we showed her the proofs of the photos, she said she didn't like any of them, and that she had a fake smile the whole day. We didn't have much contact with her for a few months after. Dear husband called her about once a week and saw her a few times. I didn't have any contact at the time. Dear husband attended church with me, and can you imagine? As soon as she heard where we were going, she started going too. She marched in wearing a $1,000 gown and jewelry, sat right beside him, ignored me completely, and introduced herself to everyone as his mother. Since that time, she has always come to church with us, even when we changed churches or when she claimed to not like the church. When my first child was born, it took H's mother-in-law 4 days to come see him because her nose was out of joint that we'd had a baby together. She lived 15 minutes away, and she drives. By the time the second was born, she had manipulated dear husband into thinking he was her favorite child, and this was meaningful to him because she withheld love and attention from him his whole life. By this point, he was doing whatever she wanted and therefore had her favor. Dear husband called her the moment the baby was born. She came right away. I was still getting V-stitches, and dear husband put a chair for her at the end of the bed, and I kid you not, the woman sat at the foot of my bed watching and commenting on my V-exam and injuries. All her comments had to do with her. How hard it was for her to see a birth scene. Her own deliveries were so bad and traumatic. Blah, blah, blah. She stayed a few hours and demanded dear husband make her tea, get her cookies, bring her the baby. Never once did anything for us or asked me how I was. 2 days later, she demanded that dear husband come and clean her house for a party she was having, and he left me home with a 24-month-old and a newborn on bed rest to clean her house for a family party we weren't even invited to. Thankfully, my mom came over that day. We have always included her in our Christmas plans and the kids' B-days. Sometimes she has been warmer than other times. She gets visibly shaky, upset with me when she doesn't get her way, but always coddles and loves on her baby boy, who is now in his 40s, by the way. Because of their dynamic, I have not pushed a lot of boundaries either. One thing I said to dear husband a few years ago was that I couldn't handle her living with us, ever. Otherwise, we have just tried to create good vibes. Although it's been all on us, she throws it away in a heartbeat when she wants to. And then dear husband tries to make her feel better and win her back. We took her house hunting with us, and dear husband would discuss his finances with her often, and once took a loan from her without discussing it with me. We even took her on short vacations with us a couple of times. I've often felt that it was a marriage of 3 of us. Fast forward to this year. She has a bad hip, and her mobility is getting poor. Dear husband was visiting her 2 to 4 times a week, doing a few things for her around the house, bringing her groceries, etc. We now have 3 children and live an hour from her. Her other children have minimal contact because she's mean, manipulative, and they resent her. But she plays them all against each other, so dear husband keeps trying to win or something. He came home one day from her house and told me she'd been crying and saying she needed to live with us, and he said yes, that she could. We argued about it because I had always said that wouldn't happen. But he stuck to, I already told her yes, I can't change it now. She's so lost without me. I was very angry and had to work through how much effort I was willing or able to put into the marriage at that point. After a week or so and some long talks with a good friend, I decided to stay for the sake of 15 years of marriage and 3 kids. But I was angry and hurt and told dear husband so. I told him when it stops working, she goes, i.e., when she becomes overly mean to me or the kids, controlling, creates drama, she goes. Or I would. He agreed. We moved H mother-in-law in a while ago. It was several months of hell. She would sit 15 to 20 feet away from me at all times and just stare, glare at me. She would glare at me while I cooked, while I cleaned, while I read to my kids. She eavesdropped constantly. If I had a friend over, she would sit with us and stare at us. She tried to interject when I was handling behavior from my kids. She insisted on using our shower and therefore walked through our bedroom and bathroom daily and moved things around. She took up 3 of 4 shelves in the shower as soon as she moved in and threw a tantrum when dear husband told her she could have 2 shelves of the 4. Yelled at him that she couldn't believe he was treating a sick old widow like this and she'd never been treated this way in her life. We served her constantly. She would refuse to come to the table for dinner, but then cry an hour or 2 later that she was starving, and dear husband would make her a plate. Usually she wanted junk food. If he said no to anything, she threw a tantrum. Once she said she was dying, and he picked up the phone and told her he was calling an ambulance. She immediately backed down and said she was fine, and she didn't know why she had said that. I know why. To get her way. She made snarky comments often. She replaced small appliances in my kitchen and told me hers were better, and that's what we were keeping. She bought a white tablecloth and made a big deal the kids couldn't get it dirty. And when I said, well, they will, they're kids, she had a fit. It was a tough time in our lives and for our marriage. More and more, I would just go up to my room and watch TV or read by myself. Months later, and we are still trying to heal. Dear husband is confused and said because he'd really thought she would do better and that she wasn't actually hateful or mean. But she is, unfortunately. Also, hope this isn't too much information, but she made inappropriate comments to dear husband about his hot body, and he looked good naked, and bought him underwear and nice sheets. Good sheets for him, she said. even though I sleep in that bed too. A couple of times, talking about him to others, she called him by the name of her late husband. I fully believe that she felt she was meant to be his partner and live in our lovely home with him and the kids, and I should just move out. And I believe that when she was staring and glaring at me, she was praying, cursing, whatever, that I would pack up and go. We called her bluff, and she moved out. She was so angry with me those few days that she wouldn't look at me and shook with anger. Although most of the disagreeing was between dear husband and her, she blamed me entirely, and it showed. I felt unsafe in my own home. At this point, I'm not interested in seeing her for the foreseeable future, and I'm not willing to put any effort into rebuilding again. I did all the work the first time, and it took more than 10 years, and I'm not doing it again. Dear husband sees her about 2 to 3 times per month, and she calls when she wants something. He usually says he's swamped and can't come by. The kids would like to see her at some point, but we're not there yet. I'm planning to see a therapist to work through my own feelings about all of this and try to gain new traction in the marriage. I love my dear husband, but he was and manipulated by her his whole life and is just coming to terms with her true self now. Any advice about healing individually and as a couple or reintroducing the kids to her would be welcome. Thanks for listening. Oh, my love, my dear love, I'm not gonna lie. When I got to the point where you said she showed up somewhere and tried to spank you, I put my phone down for a second. I continued with your post because you're putting your story out there. This woman is, as you know, a horrible, manipulative She's also a ducking witch. I mean, that should be put out there. Your dear husband failed you and your children. I'm so sorry about that. I understand he was manipulated and as well, but he failed you. You deserved better than how he allowed you to be treated by his mother. I think therapy is a really wonderful idea. I hope dear husband agrees to go with you at some point. It's so hard trying to live up to someone's ideals who will just never be happy. I'm really glad you're free of her. I hope you are able to do everything in your power to keep you and your children free of her toxic influence forever. I hope dear husband can do it as well. But I get that there were buttons installed in him in his upbringing that are real difficult to turn off. Hugs to you, friend. You deserve better than all of this. I hope you never have to deal with her again.